Welcome back to the Reier on YouTube channel, where it is time once again for Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the number one league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Travis Reier alongside my great friend and co-host, Mr. Brent Beaird. Brent, of course, longtime college football analyst, most recently for First Coast News down in Duval, Jacksonville, Florida. Brent, of course, also a voter for the most prestigious individual honor in collegiate athletics, the Heisman Trophy. Brent, can you smell it? It's here. It's talking season, my friend. We've got the Big 12 media days that we're working through this week. And then next Monday, you're going to have a contingent of coaches that will take to the center stage of the college football universe as the SEC media days get underway.
Absolutely. And shortly after that will be the Big Ten and the ACC, which is basically the same couple of days. Now, why in the world the ACC wants to overlap another conference is beyond me. But you remember, Trav, they had done that for years for the SEC, and they finally changed that. And why they don't have it on a date when no one's having theirs is amazing. But yeah, still in the midst of all that, when media days are here, it's kind of the unofficial kickoff. We'll learn more the next few days, next week, than we've learned the last 3 or 4 months. So that just to know more about what's going on will be exciting.
Yeah, I think the Big 12's been a little bit interesting here the last couple of days, mostly because we heard from Prime. We heard from the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, because there's continued to be some health concerns with Prime, and you hate to hear that, but he sounded anyway pretty adamant about being back at the helm of that program and ready to direct that team in the era following his two sons being big parts of that. And of course, Travis Hunter won a Heisman Trophy last year. But yeah, we get to look ahead now to the SEC media days. And what I thought we'd do tonight too, Brent, is we'll work through the schedule for Atlanta. And by the way, SEC media days this year will be presented right there in the ATL. Thought we'd work through the teams as they go through the event, and maybe point to some coaches that maybe feeling the heat a little bit more than some of the other coaches, and also just some coaches that maybe you're extremely interested in hearing from here in the next week. So let's go ahead and pull up that schedule right now on the screen with us here. And there you see right there on Monday, July the 14th, LSU with Brian Kelly, Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin, South Carolina, Shane Beamer, and Vanderbilt with Clark Lee. And I would say of those four, you would think that they're all in good shape going into this season, right? Lane should be Ole Miss as long as he wants to be. Shane Beamer coming off a great season at South Carolina. Clark Lee coming off a great season at Vanderbilt. So with all that being said, could it be that Brian Kelly is actually the coach of these four that's maybe going to feel the most pressure going into this season?
The thought just hit that of those four, the Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt have a lot more momentum going than LSU does. And LSU had the best portal of anyone. They've got Garrett Nussmeier coming back, who frankly will be maybe the best quarterback of all. But look, I'm with you with this. And now Kelly's got a $50+ million buyout, so he's not going anywhere anytime soon. But they are not happy that they've really not won anything. And again, and we've come back to this a lot, LSU, Clemson, opening night in Death Valley for a LSU team, Trav, that have lost a handful consecutively of openers, and they need a win badly to open the season.
Yeah, they, as you said, haven't been able to do it. Now they've played some really good teams in those openers. Now, Southern California last year, you got to win that game if you're LSU.
Really do.
Out in Las Vegas, didn't happen. So, by the way, it is Death Valley East, LSU and Clemson. Coming up on Labor Day weekend. But yeah, certainly Brian Kelly, it needs to be more of a thing for the Tigers heading into the month of November than maybe it's been the last couple of years. Although a couple of years ago, this is a team, LSU. Got that win over Alabama and eventually made its way to Atlanta for the Southeastern Conference Championship game. What about Lane Kiffin and kind of the quarterbacks for these teams too? Because that's a big storyline when I think about LSU, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. 3 of the 4 return starters. And I don't know, though, if any of those 3, LSU, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt, could be any more excited than what Ole Miss is probably about the guy they're going to put in there for Jackson Dart.
No, no question. Listen, I understand Austin Simmons. I know they've got him listed as a sophomore, but I was told today that Simmons is actually, I believe he's 19 and he's already graduated, if you can believe that. I mean, he's a smart kid, to say the least, but they love him. They think he will be fine. I mean, look, Jackson Dart may be starting for the New York Giants, right?
Could be.
But I'm not sure they're going to
save Brian Daboll's job up there. You get the sense that, and not to get off topic, but you get the sense that's kind of what's coming out of New York is that get this thing to get away from Russell Wilson, maybe get to Jackson Dart pretty quickly.
Really?
I don't know if that'll be enough to help Brian in a season in which he has to get it done up there, but sure, that's the guy that Austin Simmons is replacing. Are we making too much of Austin Simmons, though, based off of really one possession against Georgia?
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Good point.
And I loved what I saw from him. And with Lane and Charlie Weiss Jr. and that sort of infrastructure that he has to pull from, I could totally see Austin Simmons being the real deal. But I didn't have really any clue about the guy until I saw him against Georgia last November. And again, not to discount what he did, because that had the feeling of a game that was about to be one-sided Georgia's way. And then he just was like a bolt of lightning that he gave that team. Jackson Dart comes back and plays well in the game. But I guess we haven't really seen a lot of this guy. But I guess you could say the same thing about Arch Manning. And that's not slowing down the hype train either, is it?
No, but no stretch of the imagination. And Trev, I still say the guy who still, I'm not sure has got enough credit, and you covered him, is you've got a situation with the Ole Miss defense under Pete Golding that's where they've gotten better. Lane deserves all the credit for what he's done. And they have got a group of transfers again on that D line. Princely U, Xavier Harris, Jamarius Brown, Centurion Perkins is a star, very possibly in the league. TJ Daughtery. So Sage Ryan in that secondary. But what Golding has done, Trav, is to actually get them beyond just a fun team to watch offensively to a team that last year was, and we know what happened in Gainesville, but a team frankly on the verge of being in the playoffs.
Yeah, and they've, as you outlined, they've successfully mined that portal. They made it important on the defensive side, which you always wondered about with Lane. Would they just kind of go and shop the portal for his guys? And then the defense kind of has what it has. But in getting Trey Amos from Alabama, Chris Paul Jr. from Arkansas, Walter Nolan from Texas A&M, as much as anything, it's spoken to the commitment roster-wide, both areas, both sides of the football, in legitimizing that roster as best they can. And they have been a full participant where the portal is concerned. That doesn't look to be slowing down anytime soon. So we moved to Tuesday. And speaking of hot seats, Brent.
One
of these 4, I don't think it would be all that hard to figure out once we run down the teams. Auburn and Hugh Freeze, whose golf game seems to be more of a storyline for Auburn football than anything else these days. The Georgia Bulldogs, of course, represented by Kirby Smart, is just about the dean of SEC coaches. I guess Mark Stoops.
Yes.
Stoops is that guy, but crazy enough, Kirby's kind of become the next guy or one of those guys. So Kirby with Georgia, Josh Heupel with the Tennessee Vols. That should be interesting given the quarterback situation here in the offseason for the Vols. And then Steve Sarkisian, who won't be asked at all about Arch Manning, will he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now, and speaking of Freeze, Trev, do you think Freeze is happy that Kirby Smart and Steve Sarkisian, two coaches that probably many will have both those teams in Georgia and Texas in the SEC championship game? Still got to think about LSU and Alabama on that one, but that will take a little bit of it off of him. But it still really is amazing, is it not, what Sarkisian in Texas has accomplished in a very short time in the league.
It really is. Boy, Sark caught that lifeline from Nick Saban at Alabama and just he made great use of it. Give it up for the guy. Turned his life around. Had a major health scare. That was revealed during a full physical during his time at Alabama. He's gone through a lot. A lot of it he's put himself through, but he is set up big time with Arch, and still being able to kind of move into that sort of routine of just reloading year in and year out, kind of like Kirby Smart at Georgia, as you alluded to. But yeah, for Hugh Freeze, you think about this, and it's gonna feel a little heated, I think, for Hugh Freeze in Atlanta, as much as it can for an event like that. And then Josh Heupel, the coach of these four you're most interested in hearing from, I gotta think it's either Hugh Freeze or Josh Heupel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think Heupel, just because of the quarterback situation and Nico leaving, Dylan Sampson is in the NFL. Pierce on the defensive line is on the NFL. So, Trev, I think for Tennessee, it's more, okay, coach, you've lost some really good players, and that they are the ones in the running game and the defensive line or the front seven of the defense that got you into the playoffs. How quickly can this team rebound? I think that's a fair question.
Yeah, that maybe wasn't talked about enough last year with Tennessee.
Agreed.
Was how that defense did carry that team for extended stretches, because even with Nico, there were bouts of inconsistency at best. It seemed like that was a slow starting team at times on the offensive side, and the defense would kind of keep that team in it. But as you outlined, some significant losses for the Vols really across the board, and the defense is no exception to that. So we get into Wednesday. Pretty good lineup for day 3 in Atlanta. Alabama making the trip with Kalen DeBoer as a part of that contingent. Florida with Billy Napier. Mississippi State with Jeff Lebby and Brent Venables. So in terms of heat, Brent, I think you got 2 or 3 in that group, maybe all 4. I mean, because you can say, well, Kalen DeBoer's not really feeling it. Well, 7-5, 8-4, they're not all equal. Okay. No. And you can look at Billy Napier for this upcoming season. If Billy Napier goes 8-4, especially against that schedule, he'll be back.
Oh, sure.
In 2026. If Kalen DeBoer goes 8-4, I would think he would be back in 2026. But sort of the vibe to that third year for Kalen DeBoer might feel a little bit differently if Alabama doesn't fulfill expectations, regardless of head coach or roster, in a lot of situations, of being there at the end of the season, not just in the SEC, but where a national championship scenario is concerned. And then you think about Brent Venables, the changes that were made offensively, that had to be made offensively, different deal at quarterback with John Mateer coming in there from Washington State. Really just a sort of migration from Pullman with the offensive coordinator quarterback combo now, and Norman. Can Lebby get that thing going at least a little bit in year 2? Can he get an SEC win in year 2? And then sort of the rebound, or the spike in popularity to this point anyway for Billy Napier and his time at Florida.
Trev, could you make a semi argument that Venables? I think if you ask me who is a hot seat coach right now, that it probably would be Hugh Freeze. But
Yeah.
I think Venables is up there with him. Frankly, you and I both know, and for that program, they're not going to stomach another 6-6, are they?
No, I mean of the 12 SEC coaches we've mentioned so far, to me it's Venables and Freeze far and
Yes.
away
Oh yeah,
from
no
the rest of the guys.
question.
Now look, it could get sideways on Billy Napier
It
pretty quick
could.
too.
It could.
And not just because of that schedule. You know, the things that you got to worry about with coaches that seem to have survived the crap storm, so to speak, and that's what
Yeah.
Billy Napier seemed to have survived last
Right.
year,
Right.
is that go right into the next season and lose a game that you can't lose.
Yeah.
Not even to a
Right.
team that is considered to be capable of
Mhm.
being a team that can beat you, but you screw around with some team that you shouldn't screw around with, and you drop one of those.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's going to be tough enough for Florida with that schedule. So Napier, when there are sort of the breaks on the schedule where you can, you got to beat a South Florida. Obviously, you're going to beat Long Island, but the Kentucky's on the schedule. Those type of
Mhm.
opportunities, Florida's got to take advantage of, because the other games are going to be 50-50s, or maybe Florida on
Yeah.
the underdog side of more than a couple of those.
And this is by far the most talent he's had at Florida.
Mm-hmm.
This is a solid roster. I mean, that they've got arguably one of the best offensive lines in the league. Jake Slaughter, obviously is making all the preseason awards. They've got the two Wilson kids at wide receiver. I like Jaden Bond. You mentioned him. I think Jaden Bond is a big time running back,
Yeah.
frankly. And
Got a
look,
couple of big time backs
oh yeah,
still.
no doubt. And obviously when Langway's healthy, travel most games, he's going to be the better quarterback on the field.
He should be. Yeah. And you kind of had some health concerns about him too. Quarterback depth for every team is a concern, but I
Oh
think
yeah,
it may be more for Florida than pretty much any team in the Southeastern Conference. And it's going to be tougher and tougher, as we know, with the portal and the freedom of movement for guys these days to keep two capable guys. But for Florida, it's going to be really, really critical to keep them healthy. And I said this before, I think it'll show up in how he's used in the design quarterback run game,
yeah,
which with Florida's offensive line and those backs, they shouldn't need him
yes,
as much in the
right.
design quarterback run game. So that should be a benefit to Napier and that Florida staff. We got some viewers checking in. Brent, Chad,
Good.
Shoemake says, good evening, fellas. Hello, Chad. How are you on this
Welcome.
Thursday night? And then RTR Mimi, talking about Alabama, and she says, would be great if Ryan Williams was a finalist and or winner of the Heisman. That would mean he and Bama had a remarkable year. You would think so, yes. If Ryan Williams is in New York City as even a finalist,
Yes.
you would think year one under Ryan
Mhm.
Grubb as offensive coordinator for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama would have gone swimmingly. So let's talk about Kalen DeBoer in Alabama a little bit heading into that day 3 of SEC Media Days. Do you get the sense that Kalen has got this thing on a little more solid footing and kind of has it set up really in year 2 the way he would like it to have been a year ago, especially with Grubb in there now as the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. I think the excitement around this team and frankly, I think it's justified. I mean, Bama 9.5, Georgia, Texas the same.
Mm-hmm.
That's in some of the latest odds that we've seen. And I'll also say, and I thought this was a incredible stat. I give Jimmy Stein, our friend who said this, Alabama, a highly veteran team. Travis, amazingly, only 2 of 22 projected starters will not be draft eligible. And those 2 that Mimi mentioned, one is Ryan Williams, and the other one, Xavier Brown.
Yeah, couple of freshman phenoms from a year ago with Williams on offense and Brown at the corner position on defense? Absolutely. It's been Alabama's been one of the top 2 or 3 teams of the offseason in terms of when you see positional rankings. Alabama offensive line should be number 1 in the country.
Yeah.
Alabama safeties, number 1 duo in the country. There's a multitude of areas where this Alabama team is being expected to be among the very best, not just in the SEC, but in all of college football. As I've said before, kind of my response to all that after what we saw a year ago is, well, let's see it. Let's see Alabama put that on tape with the defensive line that returns all of this experience and all this depth. Offensive line, kind of the same thing. So, there's no hiding from it at Alabama ever. You're never hiding from it. But especially going into a year like this where everybody is talking about you in glowing terms.
Well, isn't it amazing how the stuff you're doing that's not even going to affect this season, i.e. recruiting. Alabama's on a heater right now in recruiting. I've seen them at 3, I've seen them at 5, but Trav, the opposite of that is Auburn's in the 70s. And look, even though these kids that we're talking about aren't going to see the field for maybe a year or 2 at least, and you certainly who've had a recruiting magazine, Trev, if you're recruiting well, it kind of makes everybody feel a lot better than maybe they normally would.
Yeah, and Alabama now for the 2026 cycle, 5 stars committed.
Yeah,
I heard Kenny Dillingham today, the Arizona State head coach, made an interesting point though. He said, I don't care if we finish dead last in recruiting with the way the portal works now.
Yeah, right.
And he said recruiting is dead, retention is alive. So points that can be made there. Now look, Alabama's a different place than Arizona State. So the challenges are going to be a little bit different. The approach is going to be a lot different at a place like Arizona State than it is at, say, Alabama. We talk about Brent Venables. Lot of hope being invested into John Mateer, a good athlete, a guy who can throw it, obviously, and familiarity in the system that's coming in. It's really interesting because the successful coaches that have stability, the guys like Kirby Smart at this point, when there's changes at offensive coordinator, the coordinator comes in and assumes the Georgia offense.
Yes.
Or at Alabama, it was the Alabama offense under Nick Saban. It wasn't the rest of the program, the players, the roster that was expected to make the adjustment. It was the offensive coordinator. But this sounds like it's going to be on everybody other than the coordinator and the incoming quarterback to kind of figure things out and get up to speed pretty quickly.
Well, and I will also say this and I'm glad that Mateer is also going to be at media days. I thought it was smart for them to bring him. Trev, I still think Jaden Ott's going to make a humongous difference for them.
Yeah, running back.
Jaden Ott, who's a transfer from Cal. Now, Auburn fans can appreciate this. Cal's a really good football team. They may not have the record that SEC schools do, but they've given some teams fits, and I would agree with that. But see, what Venables has done, and it was really smart, would be what he does best is called defensive plays, and he's back doing that. And look, him not calling defensive plays, Travel would have been like what? Steve Spurrier not calling offensive plays?
Well, there was a stretch last year where I thought he was calling offensive plays, Brent Venables.
Yeah, really.
Because the offense was just so bad. And they were decimated by injuries.
And they were.
They didn't bring back a great offensive line group going into last season. So that was a real problem. And then it seemed like any wide receiver that they tried to suit up was eventually out. So look, maybe with fresh start, some fresh legs, fresh ideas, and a potentially dynamic quarterback, maybe Brent Venables is able to move himself off of the hot seat. Let's move to the final day on Thursday. Brent, some potential there for hot seats when you talk about Sam Pittman making the trip to Atlanta as a part of the Arkansas contingent. Mark Stoops is a fascinating coach to consider, not even because I think he's on the hot seat. As we talked about before, you just wonder where at some point this sort of partnership between he and UK might just get to the point of, you know what, mutually it might work for both parties to kind of move on from that. We'll see. This, we've seen it in the past with Mark Stoops in this situation too. Although I will say it's been a couple of seasons in a row now where it hasn't been especially good. Usually Mark Stoops might have a little bit of a down year, but then he would follow it up. He kind of was Shane Beamer before Shane Beamer in the league. The same type of thing that Beamer's been doing the last couple of 3 seasons there in Columbia. That's what Mark Stoops would do at Kentucky. He's going to be interesting to consider if there's the potential for some legitimate entertainment, because frankly, when I look at this lineup of coaches, it's there's no Steve Spurrier. There's not someone that you're maybe going to have a great time listening to. Drinkwitz, Eli of Missouri could be that guy. He can be fun. And then Mike Elko coming over from Texas A&M as well.
I tell you what, Elko, just out of just pure transparency. Trev, you remember at the end of the year, he was furious with his defense. Said he said, "There's no hiding this. We can't stop anybody." So, I mean, he could lay in a few of those, but you're right. Drinkwitz is a guy that that's well worth listening to. Now that they don't have a Brady Cook this year with that. But look, back on Mark Stoops. I mean, Zach Calzada, who is with A&M, is in his 7th year. That will get quite interesting. And look, you remember this, and it ties into where you and I live. Is Liam Cohen was the OC at Kentucky, not for 1 trip, but for 2 trips. One was a lot more successful than the other along that line. But, and Trav, I really just wonder that if Stoops is going to, how many coach, do you still have the energy you used to have and so forth? I think he's going to get some of that, like, frankly, like Hugh Freeze is going to get some of these. Coach, are you concerned about your job?
And, he could be one of the coaches, too, in all this, that we hear some differences between haves and have-nots within the league. Because I think everyone looks at the SEC and thinks, oh, every team in that league is a have. Well, relative to, group of fives or the conferences like those, Kentucky is a have. But I've said it before. I think even within the league now, there is getting to the point of being clear delineation between haves, real haves, big time haves, and not have as much. I won't call them have-nots, but we'll just call them don't have as much.
I think that's fair. Now, I will say this. The thing that is, to me, the thing that sets this league apart is the middle of the league. And obviously, when you've got a situation where Ole Miss and South Carolina at 9-3 has as good an argument about getting in the playoffs as anybody else. Trev, I don't think you'll find that in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and that's why I won't call any team in the SEC a have-not. Even more so because there is still the potential for a Vanderbilt to beat an Alabama.
Right.
Now, 10 Saturdays, how many times would that happen? Maybe twice, maybe once, but it can happen, So that's going to be, and something else too that I've seen here in the last day or so is that apparently the third party NIL is going to be outlawed.
Yes.
As a part of this revenue sharing.
Right.
which I don't know. I don't know if I'm sort of in that lower tier of the don't have as much teams. If that's, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
I don't either. Right. I don't
You
think
know?
we know that right now. And look, to your point, if people haven't heard this, there's and it varies on the number, but Trev, I mean, I've heard like you that maybe what half, half of these, I don't want to call them the contracts, but half of these agreements may not pass the muster with this clearinghouse type thing. So,
Yeah, we still don't know. I mean, I can tell you reputable agencies out there that are into NIL, that have been into NIL with college players.
mhm,
They've been doing a standard 20% type of cut,
yeah.
which is high. When you think about representation of like NFL players, it's a max of 3%
Mhm.
because there's an
Mhm.
NFLPA,
Yeah.
there's a players
Yeah.
union. So yeah, those are things that are going to be very much up in the air. You got to think in the coming days, weeks, and months. So as we recap here in terms of hot seats for SEC coaches making their way to Atlanta next week, Hugh Freeze definitely is on that list. Brent Venables is definitely on
Mhm.
that list.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think Sam Pittman probably still has to be
Mhm.
on that list, although I think having Bobby Petrino back continues to be a good thing for him, right? And
Yeah.
the quarterback situation at Arkansas has the potential to be even better than it was a year
Oh,
ago.
yeah.
You hope that
Yeah.
some of the just inexplicable mistakes we saw at times kind of give way to maturity and another year with Petrino. Uh, but again, 7-5 at Arkansas with that schedule
Oh,
is
yeah.
going to be looked
Really.
upon a great deal differently than, say, if it happens at one of the 2 or 3 or 4 favorites in this league for
Well,
2025.
well, the thing that would help Sam Pittman tremendously, and I believe, Trev, they've got Notre Dame coming.
Yeah,
Look, if they,
the Lou Holtz game.
yeah,
Yeah.
if that's good, that's a great point. If they could say beat Notre Dame and upset an upper echelon conference foe, that would do wonders for that program.
Yeah, they get Notre Dame September 27th, and then they get a bye week after that. Then they go to Tennessee.
Hmm.
The thing about Arkansas is kind of like Florida too, though, like we talked about. Some of the games that you can't lose, you
Yes.
gotta
Yeah.
capitalize.
Yes.
I mean, Alabama A&M, that's going to be a win for Arkansas. Arkansas State, that should be a win for Arkansas. But then you go to Ole Miss on September the 13th. That'll obviously be a huge matchup.
Hmm.
And in between, though, in between Ole Miss and Notre Dame in September is a game at Memphis.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's the
yes.
type of
Oh, yes.
game, because Memphis in that league has been, Ryan Silverfield's done a nice job
He really
in
has.
the post Mike Norvell era up there in Memphis. So that's the kind of game I worry about more with a team like Arkansas than I do, well, even Notre Dame coming to town, because
Uh, yes.
Arkansas is going to have everything ready for that.
Well, and the other reality is, Trev, for Memphis, that's a Super Bowl for them, is it
Oh
not?
yeah, I mean, to
Uh,
get an SEC team in the Liberty Bowl,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, come on, you know? Yeah, absolutely, Brent. No doubt about that. So that's kind of the rundown. It's not really going into the season a lengthy list of hot seat coaches. But again, as we know, like everything else, that is subject to change once we get 5, 6, 7 games into the schedule of events. So, Brent, anything else before we get out of here? I know we got
Yeah.
a lot to look forward to next week. There's still a lot going on in the world of college football, a lot of it off the field. What do you got for us?
Well, I'm gonna be very interested about something and how the league handles this. Now, one of the big questions is going to be, well, are we going to stay at 8 or are we going to 9? another big question is going to be, well, coach, do you like the 12 or do you want to go to 16? Now, Trav, I'm not saying Sankey's going to tell these coaches what they need to say. I don't think we're at that point, but I'm going to be very curious how that's handled. That those are I'm not going to say there's so much a hot button as much as I just think they're incredibly important to get these things settled, and will be very interested in how these coaches and how transparent they are and what they want to happen.
Yeah, I don't know how you go to 9 if you don't know you're going to have 16
Yes,
in the
yes,
playoff.
I agree with that.
That's
Yes,
what and if I'm a coach, that's what I would want to know. Okay,
yeah,
well, if we're going to 16, I'm feeling a lot better about going to 9. As a fan, I want 9 regardless. Don't get me wrong.
sure,
I mean,
sure,
selfishly, I'm ready for 9. 9 SEC games. Absolutely, as consumers like you and I are, for sure. But as a coach, I feel like I got to kind of know how many spots we've
yeah,
got for the
oh yeah,
playoff before I can say, oh, yeah, throw another league game on top of this
oh
thing.
yeah, yeah,
And you still want us to schedule, a Big Ten type of
yeah,
opponent
right.
on an annual basis to kind of go along with all that.
And Trev, my last note is, and I saved this for some fun because I know you've seen him coach in person. One Hal Mummy
I saw
has
that.
has landed in Centenary. Hal Mummy now 73 years old, 49 years of coaching. Trav, head coaching record 142 and 152. Now look, some of the folks listening and watching us may say, well, what's the big deal about Hal Mummy? Well, we can both tell folks that there was a time when he was at Kentucky, and they were, frankly, compared to what Kentucky had done in the past, Trav, they were red hot and rolling. I mean, if I remember this, you were at the Kentucky Bama game when Mike
97.
Debo's lost
Yeah.
that game. But I wanted to throw that at you and see what you thought.
Yeah. Before it was,
with Mummy.
yeah, Hal Mummy. I mean, he is the father of the air raid.
That's
I
right.
mean, you hear so much about the air raid offense, it goes back to Hal Mummy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there, 1997, top row,
Ah,
very top row of the
whoa.
upper deck of one of the upper
Whoa.
decks at Commonwealth Stadium before it was
Woo.
Kroger Field, and Tim Couch
Yeah.
and the Kentucky Wildcats took down Alabama in overtime, and they didn't have to pay a fine back then for storming the field.
Right.
So
Right.
they got a freebie in on top of
Yeah.
everything else. I think it was the first time Kentucky had beaten Alabama in football,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in 150 years or so. No,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was a long time. So,
Right.
yep. Hal Mummy, these old coaches, man, you can't put them out the pasture.
No.
And
No.
the hardcores, they'll coach anywhere, like Centenary.
They
So
will.
it doesn't
Yes.
matter. They just want to coach. They just want to call. Hal Mummy just wants to call ball plays.
That's
Man,
right. That's right.
what he wants to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think if Steve Spurrier didn't have to put up with everything else that goes with it, and you just said, "Hey, Steve, on Saturdays you can go down there and call ball plays," he would,
Yeah.
yeah,
There you go.
let me know when.
Yeah.
They love
Well, and Trav, as we go, give your YouTube site a plug. I know you got
it.
music
Yeah,
stuff, you got golf stuff,
yeah.
and obviously everybody wants to know how well is Pop's behavior during the summer, Trav.
I checked in on Pops today, and he had just had a new air conditioning system put in the house. He got 25 years out of the previous system.
That's almost impossible, isn't it?
I said, what'd you run it on? 83?
Really?
Which he probably did. But so they went about 4 or 5 days with no AC
Oh,
and didn't tell anybody.
oh man.
So he's chilling literally right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
And he burned his yard up. He did that back in the spring. He had to
yeah,
resod his yard.
yeah.
So he's dropped, 12 grand in AC and sod.
Yeah.
in the last 4
Yeah.
months. So he doesn't like that real good. But
Hey,
he's
does
doing all
that
right.
mean, Trev, does that mean fewer presents for Nana then?
Well, we talked about what that does. I talked to him on the X about what that does for the inheritance, and he says it significantly impacts the inheritance. So we'll have to see about
Yeah,
that. Probably be some Skittles for us.
probably
That's what he
so.
likes. That's his favorite gift he
Yes.
likes to hand out. Anyway, he's good. Brent, we're good. Glad to know you're doing well and your family is doing well and getting closer, my friend.
Really is. The meetings for as far as the coaches and players being there, not only for the SEC but everybody else, kind of shows us how quickly it starts. And look, as you've told me year after year, basically when your conference meetings are over,
Yeah.
everybody is back in that building and travel. That they don't leave it until they get an away game later on, right?
That's right. That's right, man. It's here. It's rolling, like you said a show or so ago about once they get back from July 4th, it's really full steam ahead. No doubt about that. We're looking forward to it. Absolutely. Brent, look forward to doing this again real soon.
Me too, bud. Take care. Have a great week.
For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you once again for joining us live right here on Reier on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted to all the content as it drops here on the channel. Also, a thumbs up. If you would hit us with a like, that would help Brent and myself too. Brian Crane, very nice here. Comprehensive analysis, he says, and that's why he listens. Well, we appreciate it, Brian. Thanks to all the live viewers out there tonight. And again, this show archives, so catch it on demand anytime you would like. For Brent, I'm Travis. Until next time, so long, everybody.